Welcome to the Future Tech Podcast. I'm your pilot, Nolan Michaels, and I believe this is episode 21. That's kind of exciting. Officially old enough to buy a drink in America. How about that? Okay, I'm sure there is a lot to discuss this week. But first things first, Midjourney just came out with a new feature, and I might as well share my thoughts about that because it is so powerful and it's so strange to me that a feature this game changing can just be dropped on a Wednesday night. And as far as I can tell, it doesn't get the respect it deserves on the spot. Now, maybe that's not true. Maybe people are as excited about it as I am. But in terms of what other AIs offer, I just feel like Midjourney is so special. And I don't want to sound like a shill or a fanboy, but I really think Midjourney is just clearly the best. So this new feature is called tuning. And they had a bit of a internal debate about what to call this particular feature, but in essence, it allows you to answer some questions and change the style of the robot, change the style of the algorithm. You're able to influence how Midjourney generates something by answering a visual questionnaire. And it works on a prompt by prompt basis. So let's say you wanted to see a black and white photo. If you type that into Midjourney, it might give you a bunch of different things, all even in the same grid. You might get a picture that looks like it was taken with a modern camera, but then filters were applied so that it's just monochrome, it's just black and white. But in your head, you were thinking, oh, I wanted a 1930s picture, like where cameras were first invented kind of thing, and you wanted that kind of look. Now, you could use your words to describe the look you wanted, but now you don't have to do that. You simply type in a black and white photo into this new feature, /tune. You tune the prompt, a black and white photo, and then you choose a number between 16, 32, 64, and 128. And what that is going to do is develop a tournament type system where it's going to make matchups for you, a little competition between images. So let's just stick with 16 to keep it simple. If you choose 16 directions, it's going to make 32 pictures for you in 16 different head-to-head matchups. And then you get to choose between A or B in each of the matchups. So it might show you a 1930s black and white photo versus a 2010s black and white photo. And then you can choose one or the other, or neither of them, if neither of them are what you really had in mind. And what you're essentially choosing between is what you want that prompt to represent when you type it. When you type black and white photo, what do you want Midjourney to come up with? Now, let's say you chose out of the 16 different matchups, let's say you found 7 of them that represented visually what you were looking for, an old-timey black and white photo. Remember, you don't have to click every single matchup, so you might answer like 7 out of 16 possible scenarios, possible directions to take that prompt. Every time you make a selection, there's a code that's going to get generated at the bottom, and it's just random gibberish letters and numbers. But that code represents the end destination of all the directions you took. And that is so powerful. Now, this little questionnaire costs money, as in GPU hours. It's part of your subscription that it's going to take away from. But it doesn't cost as much as generating those pictures one by one. Like, when it makes this little test for you, you can't download and save all of the pictures it makes. It's just for that test. So I think that's why it's a little cheaper. Don't quote me on that, though. I don't really know why it's so much cheaper, but it is like half the price. And let's say, you chose the 7 1930s looking black and white photos, it would give you a code. But if you went back into that questionnaire and selected some different options, maybe one of the matchups it gave you included a colorized photo, something you might see out of a Photoshop filter nowadays. If you selected that, the code at the bottom would change. So these questionnaires are like updated live, and these styles that come with them can be changed, endlessly. Like, there's probably more permutations than you can physically visualize in your head. That alone makes it the most powerful feature. Can you imagine any other AI giving you that level of control? You know, there was so much talk about Midjourney censoring and having a list of banned words, and that was the narrative for a lot of months. Why can't I prompt for a bikini? Why can't I prompt for blood and gore? Well, again, I don't want to sound like a shill, but the guy who made Midjourney, or at least started the company, that's not what he wanted. That was his personal decision. They don't have investors. It's not a publicly traded company. This guy didn't want that stuff on his platform. And I really respected that because at least he was making a choice. He didn't want consumers and the public to dictate what was popular on his platform. Pretty cool that someone would have the vision, long-term vision, to know what they want and to say, well, you know, you just can't do that here. We'd love to have you, but there's certain rules. Okay, so there was a pretty negative narrative from certain people who weren't getting what they wanted from Midjourney, and I understood both sides. But then OpenAI and ChatGPT/DALL-E 3 come out in the last month, and that shows you what real censorship is. There is an imposed censorship, self-imposed. You can't reference an artist that's been alive in the last 100 years. You can't reference intellectual property. They don't want you creating pictures of things that already exist, just out of fear that these other companies and other entities and celebrities will get mad at them. Because as far as I know, there's no law that says you can't hand draw a picture of Super Mario. Nothing is stopping you from making a picture of Sonic the Hedgehog in Photoshop. But now that it's just basically a click away, some keyboard strokes and a click away of generating a picture of Mario and Sonic, all of a sudden that's just not allowed. That kind of stuff cannot happen on their platform. And I would say, I completely understand. They don't want people to easily create these striking pictures. Like before, it took some effort to create a picture of Mario and Sonic in a hot tub doing some lewd activity. And if you were willing to learn how to draw and go through all that trouble, then, you know, I guess it was your right to create a picture of whatever you wanted. Just don't try and sell it, I suppose. But now that it's so easy to generate, I really understood the censorship, or maybe not quotation marks. Maybe it is just censorship. I understood that from OpenAI. But I think it's just a real clear example of what censorship actually looks like. What Midjourney was doing before, I don't think it was censorship. It was just simply house rules. Either play by them or don't. With DALL-E and GPT, we're seeing an AI that is completely capable of doing these things and choosing not to because the people behind the scenes are just worried about liability, I suppose. But I don't think Photoshop's ever been worried about liability when they've been, you know, the catalyst for a bunch of lies, a bunch of visual misinformation for years. And they're never liable for it. I don't really know why. It seems like just two different attitudes about the exact same thing. So my point is, can you imagine OpenAI and GPT giving you access to change the style of the AI through a questionnaire? I think you could imagine it in the same way as the tuning quiz in Midjourney. You can imagine it the same way with GPT, where you give it a prompt like, hey, I need help writing advertising copy for my hair salon. And then it gives you 16 different matchups between personality and written ad copy. And you can choose that, oh, I like the way this one sounded. I like the structure of the sentences in this one. And you just kind of craft your own personality based on visual feedback. Rather than having to put that personality into words and tell GPT exactly how you want it to act, you let it act out a bunch of different ways and then pick and choose which ones lined up with your vision. And that is so powerful. I get goosebumps just thinking about it now. I think I've been on record previously stating that I didn't think making prompting easier was a good idea, but clearly I just didn't picture what this would be like. Yes, prompting is now easier with Midjourney, but it's so much better. You don't need to find the words that line up with what Midjourney thinks you're asking for. For instance, there are certain words in Midjourney that trigger certain parts of a generation, and you can learn those little tricks, but that doesn't necessarily mean that in the real world that word A means image B. It just so happens that when you put word A into Midjourney, that produces image B. And learning those tricks is just a matter of trial and error, honestly. And I think that level of difficulty really built into the experience, but I'm realizing that it just isn't necessary. If you can visually point Midjourney in the direction you want to go, that's the way to do it. That's how GPT should be. You shouldn't have to engineer a long prompt to make GPT act how you think it should act, because you don't even know if your prompt is really getting what you want, and you don't know how much of your prompt was really necessary to make GPT act in that way. If you could just present your outcome that you're looking for and have the AI give you a bunch of different options, basically saying, well, you could have meant this, but you also could have meant this. But because you said those things, I'm pretty sure you could have meant this. And if I gave you this over here, you'd probably be happy as well. If you could just lay all the options on the table and, like a buffet, you just pick and choose. I'll take a little bit of this. Ooh, maybe add weights to it. Like, oh, I just want a little bit of that sass and a lot of this professionalism, something like that. And in terms of Midjourney, you're going to get a lot of black and white photos, but then maybe one of the matchups is color. Colorized, like I said earlier, but maybe it's a really strong color. And then you start to learn that if you pick the color photo in its matchup, now your generations are going to have that as the influence. And Midjourney's tuning system isn't perfect. It's just in version 1 right now. And it's hard to mentally wrap your head around the fact that you're not just picking a style, you're picking a style for a prompt. So if your prompt was for a man black and white photo and you get a style code at the end of it, if you then tried to generate a woman with the style code, it would probably look similar. But then if you tried some poetry, like a dog galloping on the back of a shooting star, style code black and white photo, it might not translate very well because that's not the prompt you tuned. You tuned it for a man black and white photo. And in your head, you're thinking, oh, black and white photo will be able to transfer to anything. And that just isn't quite how it works right now. But intuitively, and Midjourney has come out and said that one of the reasons this feature has been delayed so much is because it's not as intuitive as you'd like. That is what they're referring to. It's just not quite clear how the magic applies to different scenarios. And it is magic. And the human brain sees this and it's like, oh, it should work in a certain way. And it just doesn't for some reason. And I've never seen such a powerful technology be misconstrued in a natural way by the human brain before. It's like very show caveman an MP3 player. Like that's how it feels. Like the caveman knows the MP3 player plays music, but there's no way he understands that that music was pre-recorded and then this thing is just audibly playing the music. The music isn't inside of the machine. And in the same way, sort of the same way with this Midjourney test, we understand that we're picking a style, picking the style that we want to see, but because it's tied to a prompt, we really just don't understand what exactly we're choosing and how it applies to other prompts moving forward. And what's really interesting is that, like, you might tune for man, black and white photo, style X4397. But if you typed in man, got rid of the words black and white photo and just used the style, you're going to get an even different picture. And like, oh, it is really hard to wrap your head around because what does that style code mean if it's so closely tied to the words black and white photo? I know I'm rambling about something that you probably haven't even tried yet, but because it's so fresh and new, it is really exciting and it's so powerful. And again, I'll repeat that. Imagine these other companies let you tune their AIs the way that Midjourney does, and just the outrage that people have for censorship when some of these companies like Midjourney are so are so accessible in such deep levels of customization and the ability to make unique art, I don't know how anyone could have anything bad to say about them. And I swear I'm not trying to be a fanboy. I really think it's just the truth. So, based on what I've said so far, what would you call that feature? They went with tuning / tune, but they've noted that it doesn't really sound right. It's not a personality test. It's not exactly a new style. It's a specific style for a specifically worded prompt. Before we had seen the feature live, I think the word vibe was being thrown out. But to be honest, it's not really a vibe either. I think I saw the word style studio, and maybe that is slightly accurate. Studio in the sense that there's a bunch of tools in here, a bunch of knobs, a bunch of different options. You can go in and find different avenues. So, because they use the word directions, do you come up with a word that sort of implies a trip, a destination, an itinerary? No, it's not an itinerary. What is the perfect word for this? And I really don't know. Like, either there is the perfect word for this feature and nobody can think of it, or the word to describe what you're doing just simply doesn't exist yet. You're taking a bunch of photos and you're selecting the ones you want and then creating more images that represent the average of what you chose. Is that a vibe? Are you selecting the personality of the bot, but you're not? Because I think with GPT it would make more sense to call it a personality test, because words are a personality, but an artist's visual representation of something, I don't think that's a personality. And then maybe you could talk about how visual representation choice is the best wording to describe the feature, but that's not a very good buzzword for marketing and product development. And, it needs a crisp, clear word, and tuning might be the best way to describe it. But it's really interesting that they created a feature that doesn't naturally have a word associated with it. Like, no matter what word you choose, there's going to be a portion of people who are like, wait, what am I doing? I'm tuning it? Tuning it like a car, like a guitar? What are you tuning exactly? It's a style tuner. Okay, that makes a bit of sense. A prompt tuner maybe makes the most sense, but only makes sense after you use it. Before you use it, it's like whatever. But then maybe there's a lot of Photoshop tools that don't have very intuitive words to describe them either. Masking. What is masking? If you use it, you understand. You're creating a mask around an object in the image. But if someone just told you to go mask something in Photoshop, you'd be like, first you'd think mask as in human covering a face. I'm covering something, I'm masking it. And okay, maybe that does make sense. But maybe you sort of have to invent definitions a la Shakespeare. You create a word or pick a word, apply context to it, and then have people learn and associate word with function. And there you go. Now you have a new word in the lexicon, the glossary of AI. I don't know. What do you think? Have you used this feature yet? What would you call it? Do you think it matters what it's called? I don't know. And I think it's been so funny. Maybe not funny, but it's been interesting the last few weeks to see people in my comment section say that Midjourney is dead and that they're sleeping at the wheel and these other AI companies are going to catch up and pass them. And I'm canceling my membership, my subscription. There hasn't been enough progress. I can get what I need from other AIs. And I'm like, okay, that's good feedback. I don't work for Midjourney, so I don't really care, but that's good feedback. That's a good place to vent, to let the world know that you're feeling a certain way, and that's all fine and dandy. But it just shocks me that a lot of people don't have a long-term vision. And I'm talking like just a couple of months. Like, to say that DALL-E 3 killed Midjourney is so strange to me, because when Midjourney version 6 comes out, I'm pretty sure those same people are going to say, Midjourney version 6 killed Dolly 3. And then when Dolly 4 comes out, people are going to say Dolly 4 killed Midjourney version 6. And then Midjourney version 7 is going to kill Dolly. Do you see what I mean? But how do other people not see that? They think that this AI, like once it's made, it's just done. But have we not learned in the last year? It's just been 12 months that this AI progresses. It keeps getting better. It's going to keep getting older, and it's going to keep impressing us every single iteration of itself. Why would any particular version be the focus of your definitive statement that version 5.2, this is the best Midjourney will ever be? Like, I've said this before, probably last week. It sounds like somebody's talking about a teenager and looking at a 12-year-old and saying, you see the way this 12-year-old opens a pickle jar? That thing will never be able to drive a car. And like everyone else, or at least I would say, yeah, okay, but what about when they're 16? Like, what about when they grow up? They're going to be able to drive a car. You can drive a car. So this 12-year-old's not going to stay a 12-year-old forever. Like, what is the point of criticizing something that you know is going to get better? And maybe they don't know it'll get better, but how do they not know that by now? Midjourney version 3 is the coolest thing I have ever seen. And it's only gotten drastically better. Drastically better. Night and day. Literally more than twice the ability to produce whatever you can think of. And I don't understand that, like, okay, put it this way. Maybe I do understand why people think that Midjourney is slacking or the progress isn't fast enough. Okay, maybe I don't understand that part because AI technology is faster at progressing than any other technology that's ever existed. But I'm assuming a lot of people don't listen to the office hours every week. And if you just heard stories of some CEO somewhere promising new technology and they're going to do this and they're going to do that, and then you don't see it for a couple of months, you know, maybe you're like, oh, that guy's full of shit. He's a liar. He's a con man. Snake oil. This guy's going to rob our whole village, our whole township. We don't need anything to do with that guy. But when you listen to him yourself, you're like, oh, he's not lying. It's just he tells us what they're working on every week. And he's openly stating that they don't know how long it's going to take them. That's what they're working on. And then he tells us when some things don't work. And he tells us what they're trying to accomplish. And when you hear it from him, it's so clear that the technology is going to progress. They just haven't figured it out yet. But they're actively trying to figure it out. And they have some good ideas. And a lot of the times they have prototypes. But this is something we could never know. But he is telling us that it's just not quite ready for everyone yet. There are certain things that won't work. And I don't know if he's worried about bad publicity. But I think, let's say you release it to 10 people. 7 of them have a great time. But none of them are neutral. The 3 that aren't having a great time are having an actively bad time because the new feature does not do what they're trying to accomplish. And I think, not that I've spoken to anyone about this and not that I have a psychology degree, but I get the sense that they want the floor of the experience to be very, very high. They want the roof, the ceiling of the experience to also be high, like a 10 out of 10, my favorite technology ever. But they want the floor to be like an 8 out of 10, to where you get beautiful art no matter how little you try. They don't want the floor to be a 1 out of 10 or a 3 out of 10 or a 4 out of 10. Much in the same way that Photoshop's floor is honestly like a 0 out of 10. If you go into Photoshop and you don't know what you're doing, you won't be able to accomplish anything. And that's not entirely true anymore thanks to AI, specifically generative fill. But for the last 20 years, Photoshop had such a low floor, an incredibly high ceiling, but because the floor is so low, most people just look up and they're like, well, how am I going to touch the ceiling? Like, there's no steps here. I have no idea what I'm doing. If your floor is an 8 out of 10, it is a lot easier to see yourself touching the ceiling. And again, I don't have any personal knowledge of their philosophy, but it sounds like they want a very high floor. And if a new feature is being developed and the floor is just a little too low, I'm talking like a 5 or a 6 out of 10, That's just not something they're interested in delivering to millions of users. If you had 10 million people and 3 out of 10 of them didn't like it, that's 3 million people. That is a ton. That's 30%. Even if 3% of people didn't like the product, the feature, that's 300,000 people. That is so many voices complaining about the low floor of your product. That might be something to consider when you're about to push the release button. Again, I don't know, but I think I just exercise some patience. Like, if something isn't ready, then we'll just wait till it's ready. Like, what are we? I feel like it's literally complaining about magic. Oh, the wizard's not back yet. Well, okay. Can you do what the wizard does? Can you do it better? Can you do it faster? Can you perform the magic yourself? I'm going to go ahead and say the answer is no. You can't. I can't. So what are you complaining about? Like, what is the point of complaining about the lack of progress when you wouldn't be able to accomplish it yourself? I don't think I'm saying it quite right, and it would help if there was another person in the room to be like, oh yeah, I know what you're trying to say. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but it's like, don't bite the hand that feeds you, sort of. If someone is willing to help you, like an AI, aren't you just happy that it exists? Like, why is there any vitriol about something not being done, as in completed when you would like it to be? Now, I think this would apply to musicians as well. Like, if a band hasn't released an album in a long time, well, you're no different. You're just waiting on them. You're the exact same as whether they released it or not, or whether they completed a new album or not. You can't complete the album for them. So what are you complaining about? Shouldn't you just be happy that they're working on an album, or that the possibility of an album being made, new music being created? Wouldn't it just be nice if a new video game was created rather than being upset that it's not here yet? And I'll say on the flip side of that, I do understand it in terms of George R.R. Martin and people being upset that the newest Game of Thrones book hasn't been finished yet. And I think that relates to his age. And people are upset that if he hasn't gotten around to it yet, we only live for so long, and I think he's approaching the end of his toothpaste bottle. People are worried that he is going to expire before he finishes the story. And I think that's a legitimate fear in terms of being impatient about something where, time's almost out. Can you please hurry up a little? That I do understand. But in terms of AI, and we're talking months here, like, it's been like 4 months since version 5 was released. 5.2, maybe. Has it been 4 months? Maybe 5 months? November? Yeah, okay, maybe 5 months. Maybe it's been a long time, relatively. Still, no, I don't know. I don't understand the lack of patience on something that you couldn't do yourself. Let me just say that. There's a lot I wanted to get to today. Okay, let me do some quick notes here. A video game came under fire recently for the reveal that their announcer in the game was scripted. Maybe not scripted, but it was voiced by an AI, like a text-to-voice model in the game. And a lot of people said, oh, like, that's why it's so good. And apparently, like, this AI, it's a shooting game, so you have different teams, and you're trying to delete each other from the battlefield. And apparently the announcer is very acutely aware of, one side losing a member, and then, oh, this team's winning. And they'll announce it to the game. Like, oh, Team A has lost a man. He fell off of a building. That must have hurt. I'm being cheesy. I'm not saying that's an exact line, but the announcer seemed to be very adaptive and receptive and reactionary to the events of the game. And that's impressive. When people found out that an AI was helping with it, there was quite a bit of pushback saying, like, some people would say, oh, that's why it sounds funny. But, like, I don't think you can tell that it was voiced by an AI. And then you get the whole, well, it's taking people's jobs. But then the developers came out and said something to the extent of, we're able to do so much more now. Instead of taking months to record lines and yada, 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 we're able to, within a couple of days, inject the game with this new contextual system and new lines for certain events. And then some people called BS on that, saying it's just about money. It doesn't need to take months. You just don't want to pay the actors for their time. And, it seems like both sides are telling the truth in some respect, and both sides are probably fibbing a little about what the workflow really looks like. And then I did see some comments saying, well, no, that's a good use of AI. That's what it should be used for. Quick updates, iterative updates on current events within the game faster than a human could ever update the game. And I feel like there's going to be a portion of people who are always going to be outraged over the word AI because they've just been conditioned by other people in their communities. And it's so sad because AI is so powerful and so cool. I just wish they would embrace the coolness of it. And I get the human aspect of it. You don't want people to lose their jobs, but just maybe, I don't know. I don't want to sound harsh. I really don't know how I feel about it. If you wanted Snoop Dogg to be your announcer in your video game, instead of paying him hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars for his time to record 8,000 lines from this giant textbook of scenarios, what if you paid him in the low hundreds of thousands to license his voice, maybe say a few key lines, and then have Snoop Dogg's voice say whatever you want, because you're able to train the AI on the voice and have it be an adaptive system? Isn't that better for everyone? So I don't want to replace the voice actors, but is their workflow really necessary anymore? Can't they just adapt to the new workflow? It seems like the best of both worlds. Can you hear that siren outside? I feel bad anytime I hear a siren. Happens a lot in Toronto. You try and block it out, but you're just thinking, well, somebody's having a tough time, and I hope they get the help they need. My dream scenario for AI announcers, and I don't think I've mentioned this before, but I've had this thought for a while now, is sports video games. A common complaint about video game sports is how the announcers suck so bad. People will just mute them and either listen to music or just listen to the game without the announcers, because the announcers will repeat the same line over and over again if the same event gets triggered. And because it's a sport, similar events always get triggered. Oh, he's a brick wall in there. If you know what that's from, I'll send you $5 of virtual good luck money, metaphorical dollars, coming your way if you know where that line's from. Oh, and another thing is if something kind of minor happens in a sport, maybe in hockey, you'll shoot a weak shot on goal, and the announcer will scream because it's the craziest save ever. And you're like, what is this guy talking about? Relax, man. If you had AI announcers who could say, Matthews to Marner, back to Matthews, back to Riley, he mishandles the pass, maintains possession, dekes at the line, down low to Matthews, over to Marner, score! If you could have on the fly announcing adapt to your movement as you make the play, that would be the coolest game you've ever seen. The ultimate immersion fantasy right there. And I'll tell you, as soon as a sports video game comes up with an AI announcer, nobody is going to complain about it. Nobody is going to say, hey, what about the people? What about the human? Where's the soul? And you're like, have you ever played a sports game? Do any of those announcers have souls to you? Or are they simply annoying at best? I mean, there are some instances of announcers being good, but it's never as good as you want it to be. Like in NBA 2K games, they go through quite an extensive cinematic broadcasting process and everything looks pretty good, but it's never quite great. And a lot of the audio ambience is just weird. They'll go to a sideline reporter and it will sound like she's recorded her voice and her lines in a closet. And you're like, this is a 20,000 person arena in the playoffs. What do you... But if you had a GPT script that could ask intelligent questions about the game, and then maybe you slip something into the collective bargaining agreement with the NBA players and you get all their voices, and you could have the players react and answer questions based on the game. Wow, wouldn't that be amazing? Now, I guess you do run the risk of these AIs saying something you don't want them to say if you go full chat GPT mode, and maybe there's some massaging that would need to go on there, but I think that's a pretty case by case basis, and that's the new job. That's the new presentation employee. This is their work that you have to work on for 9 months now. Make sure the AI doesn't say anything we don't want it to say. That would be pretty cool. That is something, oh, we need that so badly. That is what would take video games to the next level. Or just that same idea of like the narrator in a silent protagonist game. Maybe you don't want Link to say any words in the next Legend of Zelda, but what if you had Princess Zelda reading from the book? She's reading the story of the game. And as you do things, maybe she gets to that page in the book and talks about not only what you did, but how you did it. And you're writing the book of the Legend of Zelda. That's a good idea. I think, yeah, it's a really good idea. I love that idea. Harness AI. This stuff is so powerful. Let's make stuff that we couldn't make without it. I think that's the point. And then lastly, I'll talk about this. Why are some people so dismissive of AI? Why is their natural reaction not only to hate something, maybe they don't even get to that stage of emotion. They dismiss it. They don't want anything to do with it. They don't want it to show in the headline of their subreddit. They don't want somebody mentioning AI in the comments. They don't want to look at what is going to be all around them any second. Imagine being in a flood, your city is getting flooded, and anytime somebody mentions getting on a raft or swimming, you block it out, you PTSD block it out. You don't hear them, you shun them for mentioning that now everything is soaked. That is such an unhealthy reaction that I see a lot of places online. Maybe that's part of the problem, is that I'm trying to understand people online and in the comments they leave when that's not necessarily how they would react in real life, and I get that. But the way you react to something online still says something about you, I think. So why are people so dismissive of AI? Why is Allen Iverson such a touchy subject? That's a bit of a joke. My idea, wouldn't call it an idea. I don't even think I believe this, but it's a thought I had, and I wonder what you think. I think people dismiss AI because they are scared that even if they used it, they still wouldn't be successful. Essentially, AI means no more excuses. If you, in your mind, have always wanted to make a comic book, that's just an easy example right now, and then you hear something like Midjourney has come out, and then DALL-E 3 can now write your prompts for you, basically, and you just have to ask for them. There's really no excuse for you not to make that comic book. Whereas 2 years ago, you could rationalize it to yourself. You're like, oh, I don't have the money for that. I can't draw. I don't want to take 36 months to learn how to draw. Nobody would buy it anyways. How am I going to sell it? And I think maybe some people shun social media because, if you ever wanted to speak to a lot of people, now is your chance, but you're not going to do it. The excuse has been taken away from you. You have the opportunity. It's there. You didn't know how to draw, but now Midjourney and art generators exist. The excuses you have for your lack of creative output are no longer valid. So instead of addressing that and either coming up with new excuses or just simply trying to pursue your dream, your daydream, you dismiss the AI because you don't want to face your own critique. You don't want to face your own limits, your self-imposed limits. I don't know. Like I said, I don't really believe that. It's just a thought I had that why do people dismiss AI when it's so powerful? Well, it gets rid of all their excuses. And if they were to use the AI, they still might not be successful. Like I could say to myself, oh, if I only had someone who could draw as easily as I could think. And I said that a few years ago in a very personal conversation with someone else. I said, I wish I had someone who could draw as easily as I could think. And as if I had any influence on the shape of reality, sure enough, art generators become a thing a few years later. And now I have something that can draw as easily as I could think. I no longer have any excuse not to pursue my creative passions. And I think that's maybe why I tackled learning about them so head on. It is definitely one of the reasons why I'm waiting a little longer till it can really do what I want. But I've got a lot of stories written down in terms of what I want to attach pictures to. So there are no more excuses. I can't ignore AI, because if I ignored AI, what would I say to myself? Like, oh, that's a really cool story. Why isn't there anyone that can help me draw this? Why don't I know anyone that can make some art for me? How could I ever tell anyone about my new book? And if you were to say those things out loud, people would point out, like, hey, you could start a social media page. You could start a YouTube channel. Have you ever heard of AI? They have these great art generators that can make whatever you want. Like, the answers to a lot of problems are found within AI. And my idea is that maybe that's why some people are so dismissive of it, because it takes away all their excuses. I'm not a psychologist. I have no idea if I'm right. I'd love to hear from you. That's it for today's episode. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you're doing well. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Peace.